From Washington, D.C., I'm Allister D'Souza. This is Washington Watch, a weekly roundup of the biggest stories from the United States and beyond the headlines.
Look, Elon and I had a great relationship. I don't know if we're well anymore. I was surprised.
After a very ugly fallout between the US president and the world's richest man, perhaps signs of a truce according to US publication Politico, Trump has threatened to rip apart federal contracts Musk holds with the government. Musk has called for Trump to be impeached and insinuated without evidence that Trump was associated with late pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Trump's mega bill is headed to the Senate and is on wobbly ground. Many Republican lawmakers have said they aren't happy with the bill, with some even saying they'll oppose it over concerns that it will balloon the government debt. The bill allows for large tax cuts while pulling back on food assistance and health insurance. US President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping have agreed to launch a new round of trade talks. It was the first known phone call between the leaders since Trump returned to the White House in January. Trump says the US is in good shape with China for a trade deal.
Well, I said that the interpretation of trade deficits is a bit Mickey Mouse, meaning that it is dramatically wrong and oversimplified to the point of being ridiculous.
In an exclusive interview with NDTV, renowned world economist Jeffrey Sachs slams President Trump's trade policy, says India should not make concessions in a rush for a trade deal with the US. He says India has opportunities with other partners across the world. Revisiting a move from his first term, US President Donald Trump has issued a sweeping travel ban for people from 12 countries. It affects several countries and comes into place on June 9th. It impacts those traveling from Afghanistan, Myanmar, Venezuela, amongst others. Our top story, there are signs of a possible truce amid a bitter row that has unfolded between US President Trump and Elon Musk. We'll have those exclusive details from a reporter at Politico coming up for the publication, which is breaking that exclusive story right now. But first, let's get a look at how Elon Musk and Donald Trump went for the jugular on social media.
The inevitable has finally happened. The unlikely alliance of billionaires US President Donald Trump and Tesla chief Elon Musk has crashed and burned, leaving behind a messy public feud filled with personal attacks and accusations. Shortly after leaving the Department of Government Efficiency after a scheduled tenure ended, Musk began lobbying against Trump's Big Beautiful Bill, calling the bill, which was passed by the US House last month and is awaiting a vote in the Senate, a disgusting abomination, even pushing to kill the bill. For a while, President Trump remained silent, until he didn't. Defending the bill, Trump attacked Musk, suggesting that the Tesla chief's disapproval of the bill was triggered by the removal of subsidies and mandates for electric vehicles, saying that Musk has Trump derangement syndrome.
But I'm very disappointed because Elon knew the inner workings of this bill better than almost anybody sitting here. And he only developed the problem when he found out that we're going to have to cut the EV mandate, because that's billions and billions of dollars. And it really is unfair. I don't know what it is. It's sort of Trump derangement syndrome, I guess they call it. But we have it with others, too.
In a flurry of posts on X, Musk took credit for Trump's sweeping victory in last November's elections, and even suggested that the president appears in the unreleased Jeffrey Epstein files and called for his impeachment. But the feud has come at a cost, a big one especially for Musk, as the US president threatened to pull Musk's government subsidies and contracts, the lifeblood of the SpaceX program. Tesla's stock price took an immediate hit, wiping out a whopping $150 billion from Tesla's market cap. While reports suggest that the two may have cooled down temporarily, the uncertainty remains. After all, both men are mercurial and are not known to hold back when cornered. Disha Bagchi for NDTV World.
We're joined by Ari Hawkins. He's a reporter with online publication Politico. Ari, Politico has exclusive details, I understand, on a possible truce between two of the world's most powerful men. What is your publication saying? And I also hear that Politico had this interview, one-on-one interview with Trump yesterday as well.
That's right. In an interview with Politico, we saw that Trump was playing down effectively a lot of this sort of back and forth, talking about how things will keep going, it will be okay, making those kinds of statements clearly in a response to this kind of flare-up that we saw. However, one thing to note is that after that story went out there, we've seen more recently this morning that Trump has declined to take a call, or at least has no interest in taking a call at the very moment, with Elon Musk to temper these concerns further. Meaning, while there are efforts on both sides to water some of this down, we saw obviously those remarks from Trump, but also Elon Musk on Twitter engaging with some folks that are trying to sort of find a little bit of a truce here. Despite the fact that we see them sort of signaling that they might want an off-ramp to this, it's pretty clear that this is the type of feud that is going to continue once it's already been set in motion.
Indeed, in many ways that making peace here would be inevitable considering the stakes on both sides. That brings me to my next question here. Ari, what does Musk really stand to lose if he doesn't ensure that things simmer down?
Musk stands to lose his standing within the Republican Party. Musk has already alienated progressives, obviously, but also independents, meaning that this sort of Republican conservative base is his sort of key demographic that he needs to keep a hold of. And we already saw that Republicans in Congress, because of his criticism of this so-called big, beautiful bill, really taking issue with that. It's a thorn in their side. And despite Elon Musk's persistent popularity among some conservatives, this is definitely something that is going to hinder how effective he's able to speak with lawmakers and potentially connect with that conservative base, despite the fact that he is a very online person, which doesn't always necessarily translate directly to electoral politics.
And billions of dollars, of course, at stake for him with all his business interests and contracts with the federal government, which Trump has already threatened to rip apart.
That's right. And we saw another factor come into play here where he said that Trump's trade and tariff agenda would lead to a recession in the near future. And that's something that has been a persistent source of strain in the relationship. We saw Tesla, a very multinational company, is the type of organization that would be very impacted by an expansion of trade and tariffs in particular. And that's something that we're going to see kind of come out. And it seems as if Elon Musk's criticism of his tariff policy in particular has sort of been outweighed recently by some of the other things about the Trump agenda that Musk really likes. But now it seems that that dynamic is flipped.
Just want to quickly ask you this in about 30 seconds. Which of Musk's business rivals really stand to benefit from this rift?
That's a good question. I think anyone, particularly in the tech space, could see a rise. You could see also a rise in folks like Mark Zuckerberg, who has been speaking. He was on Joe Rogan's podcast more recently, potentially could fill in that gap if Elon Musk really does alienate some of the more sort of conservative-leaning supporters of Musk. From a business standpoint, that's much more up in the air, particularly as we see sort of a rise of companies trying to make good with the Trump administration, boost investments, and really try to take that mantle away from Elon Musk. We'll have to see how that goes in the next couple of weeks.
Ari Hawkins from Politico, thank you very much for your time here on Washington Watch. In other news, now critics are slamming a U.S. travel ban in 12 countries, which President Trump says protects Americans from terror and public safety risks. Think tank Cato Institute says since 1975, only one person has been attacked on U.S. soil committed by somebody from those banned countries. Here's more on which nations made it into the controversial list.
We will not allow people to enter our country who wish to do us harm, and nothing will stop us from keeping America safe.
In a sweeping return to one of his most controversial policies, President Trump has reinstated a broad U.S. travel ban, in effect from 9th of June, this time targeting 12 countries with full restrictions and slapping partial bans on 7 others. The White House calls it a move to shield Americans from foreign terrorists and national security threats. But behind that justification lies a deeper ripple of fear and disruption. Students, families, and professionals from across Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East now face a wall they didn't see coming. Trump cited the recent attack in Boulder, Colorado, carried out by an Egyptian national who had overstayed his visa as the key trigger. But Egypt itself, notably, isn't on the banned list. The 12 fully banned nations include Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Congo, Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. 7 more, including Venezuela, Cuba, Laos, and Sierra Leone, face partial restrictions. This ban is part of Trump's larger crackdown on immigration. In 2021, Biden reversed the policy, calling it a strain on our national conscience. President Trump says the list could be revised, but with one proclamation, the US has once again shut its doors to thousands, adding to the growing uncertainty amongst various legal immigrant groups. As the clock ticks down to 9th of June, families scramble and the futures of thousands hang in balance. Remains to be seen if the latest policy measure will stand the test of courts. With Rhythm Arcadia, Bureau Report, NDTV.
This week saw warnings from the US's biggest banks. JP Morgan's CEO Jamie Dimon says that the US bond market will crack under rising debt. His comments echo similar sentiments from the president of Goldman Sachs, John Waldron. Now, President Trump's mega bill is expected to see US debt skyrocket. The bill awaits Senate approval, where many Republicans have reservations on voting in favor of it. Let's get you more on this and the global repercussions of Trump's trade policy. I am joined by world-renowned economist Jeffrey Sachs for an exclusive interview. Thank you very much indeed, Professor Sachs, for joining us here on Washington Watch. Appreciate your time. Professor Sachs, President Trump's key reason for his trade policy is the world has taken advantage of the US. He points to various trade deficits, for example, with India. He thinks it's high time for a level playing field. Now, you've likened the approach to Mickey Mouse country. Why do you say that?
I said that the interpretation of trade deficits is a bit Mickey Mouse, meaning that it is dramatically wrong and oversimplified to the point of being ridiculous. Trade deficits occur when countries in the aggregate spend more than they produce. This is an identity, we say in economics. In other words, it's a precise definition of what we mean by a comprehensive trade deficit, which we measure as a country's current account deficit. The fact of the matter is the United States spends more than it produces. And the main reason for that is our chronic large budget deficit. In fact, our government acts as a kind of credit card for the nation. The government borrows at relatively low cost, or it used to borrow at relatively low cost, and then it would make transfers of income back to the population through various programs. And it's been doing that for more than 2 decades, and the debt has accumulated dramatically of the government. And the counterpart of that is massive spending on foreign goods. So we've had current account deficits alongside budget deficits. If President Trump is serious about wanting to reduce the external deficit, he needs to cut the internal deficit. Or to put it another way, if he wants to get these trade deficits down, he has to get the budget deficit down. But he seems intent on not doing that. He wants more tax cuts for his favored recipients, larger military spending, continued large deficits. So we'll have continued large trade deficits as well.
Right. Let's talk about that trade deficit. Now, one of many countries trying to strike a deal with the US is India. Some news reports suggesting that New Delhi has actually toughened its stance as it works to strike a deal more favorable to India. Now, you've said do not allow Trump to play India. How much leverage, though, do you think India really has at this juncture, given that the US is its largest trading partner?
Well, the first point I would say about the U.S. economy is that it is large, but not a dominant or overwhelming part of the world economy, and a large but not dominant part of the U.S. The world demand for exports, whether from India or any other country. So I think the tariffs are harmful to India as they are also to other countries and to the United States. So I don't think that they're insignificant, but I would not let a national policy be overwhelmed by them. India has lots of potential trading partners. It has lots of markets worldwide. It's part of the BRICS, which is a very important and significant group of countries. I do believe India should join RCEP also, the next door neighbor free trade area that includes China, Japan, Korea, the 10 ASEAN countries, Australia, and New Zealand. If India were part of that, India's trade would be more assured, and India would find that it has a market of more than 2 billion people next door in which it's well engaged. So I think India has other alternatives and should not do somersaults to try to satisfy the United States. In particular, it should not discriminate against its other trade partners. It should not make concessions to the United States that undermine the most favored nation principle of international trade. That is that India is bound to give most favored nation trade status to all of its counterpart trading partners that are in the World Trade Organization. The United States should not break that basic principle of international trade because then we devolve into a game of favorites, into an endless round of negotiations and bilateral negotiations numbering in the thousands. So this would be terrible rather than having a world trading system. India should watch itself so that it doesn't get sucked into the U.S. game.
Right. Professor Sachs, let's get back to the U.S. The Fed, in its latest minutes of their meeting, have warned of an increasing recession risk. The U.S., as you know, has seen recessions before. What do you, though, see different this time around as far as the impact on the rest of the world goes?
Well, first, we're having a self-inflicted recession or economic crisis. The economy was not heading for a downturn before all of the uncertainties and instabilities of recent weeks took hold. These are uncertainties that are causing the Fed and private forecasters to revise their estimates. They've also caused a downturn, albeit with ups and downs, in consumer sentiment. There's just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is largely self-inflicted. We can't seem to have a rational economic policy that rationally examines where an economy should head, and in particular to digital and green technologies, that is low carbon. The U.S. has abandoned the low carbon road at the federal level of this administration, so we don't even know which direction to go because Trump has pulled the U.S. once again out of the Paris Climate Agreement and has downplayed structural transformation that's needed. And then comes the tariff disruptions of world trade. And now comes a budget policy that is, I guess, in Elon Musk's words, a monstrosity. And so this is our problem. We're making a mess of things internally. Here you have the richest economy in the world, but it just can't behave in a rational way.
Right, Professor Sachs, now Trump's mega bill is facing some opposition from Republican senators, not just Elon Musk, who, as we know, has been unrelenting, not mincing his words, especially in the past 24 hours. The bill is forecast at $2.4 trillion, some say over that as well, in debt over the next decade. If you could simply explain why this is such a huge problem for ordinary Americans.
Basically, there is no agreement in the United States about what the government should do and how it should pay for what it does. And the result is that we have a chronic situation where the government at the federal level takes in about 16% of gross domestic product and spends 22 or 23% of gross domestic product. That gap is our deficit of about 6 to 7% of GDP, and that deficit is financed by selling government debt, U.S. Treasury bills and bonds. That debt is rising sharply. We have a mountain of debt that has accumulated that is now about 100% of our national income. That means that as interest rates rise, the interest bill on this debt is now around 3% of our gross domestic product, and it will continue to rise because interest rates themselves are now rising, certainly at the long-term end, to above 5%, 5 percentage points, I should say, 5% per year yields. So we have a mountain of debt, a rising debt, rising interest rates on that debt, and this stretches out for decades to come on the current policy scenario. Our Congressional Budget Office projects that the debt will rise to above 150% of GDP. Well, what does that mean? It has many implications. One is financial instability. Governments with such large debts are unstable, and that is why Moody's just downgraded the U.S. credit rating by one notch, one step. That means higher borrowing costs, and that can lead to a vicious spiral where the borrowing costs rise. That exacerbates the deficits because you have to pay interest on this mountain of debt, and that leads to a spiral of instability.
Jeffrey Sachs, thank you very much indeed for your time here on Washington Watch, that exclusive interview with us here on NDTV. Time for a quick look at some other stories in brief. Democrat Zoran Mamdani, of Indian origin, tapping into his Desi roots to make his case for New York City mayor with a very Bollywood-styled campaign promo. Mamdani recently won a coveted endorsement from U.S. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Mamdani still has to make it through to the primaries on 24th June, which has largely settled into a two-way fight between the outsider Mamdani and former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now, New York City leans heavily Democrat. Mamdani is the son of filmmaker Mira Nair. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz has met President Donald Trump in Washington for the first time since becoming leader of Europe's biggest economy last month. In a meeting that Merz calls friendly, the two leaders discussed the Russia-Ukraine war, and Merz mentioned that D-Day, June 6th, was coming up, to which Trump had an interesting response.
Absolutely, and I'm here, Mr. President, to talk with you later on how we could contribute to that goal. And we all are looking for measures and for instruments to bring this terrible war to an end. And may I remind you that we are having June 6th tomorrow. This is D-Day anniversary, when the Americans once ended a war in Europe. And I think this is in your hand in specific, in ours.
Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick saying that he's very optimistic about prospects for a trade deal between the US and India, adding he thinks trade negotiators have found a place that really works for both countries. The Commerce Secretary says that India may get more favorable terms from being one of the first pacts agreed upon.